Going back to this question of learnings, what else comes to mind? You're running this brilliant business, have been doing so for over 2 years now. Have there been any kind of horror stories which have then led to brilliant learnings? Has there been a really steep learning curve? Would love to understand all of that.
Really super steep learning curve. And I think the biggest learning of the learning curve was you always think, oh no, I don't know how to do that. There's always these barriers that you think like you can't overcome. But when it's your business and you have ultimately the absolutely terrifying fear of failure and like not making this work, it will make you get over anything. So like setting up our first Facebook ads and paid ads, you learn how to do Google search, you learn how to hack SEO in the early days before we had any employees. And I think that the biggest learning is that like you can't underestimate your own ability. But equally, when you can then hire people to do it better than you, don't overestimate your own ability, because there's always people out there who can do those smaller things better.
Yeah.
It's just that in the early days, you don't need to pay like, I see founders ask like, oh, does anybody know anyone good to set up my Google Analytics properly? It's like, you can do that yourself. Like you don't need to pay somebody to do something like that. So I think that's another really, really big learning.
And it also helps having that kind of initial understanding of something before you then delegate it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Otherwise you've got no clue of what good looks like.
And then people can totally take advantage of you in that instance as well, if you don't really know how things work. And then when you try and interview somebody, how do you know what you want if you're interviewing someone to hire them, if you like have literally no idea about what your tech stack is? Like, I still really wouldn't want to interview a tech person. Thank God we have a technical co-founder. But like, if you know nothing, you're very easy to take advantage of.
Is starting a business something that you would recommend to other people? And you mentioned these two different camps of people. Let's say we're talking about those who are in a stable job and their lifelong ambition is not to start a business.
Yeah.
So it's something they could fall into. Would you recommend that those people do?
If you have an idea that you like really, really, really do believe in, then yes, like I love it. But I think one of the reasons that I love it so much is when I was in my career, like I never found anything that was right. I got bored very, very quickly. I wanted to be a generalist. That's kind of what I am. And I think for generalists, starting a business is quite exciting because you get to do so much stuff.
Yeah.
But equally being a specialist, if you're a brilliant engineer, then why wouldn't you go and be a technical co-founder? Like there's so much opportunity. I think that people do underestimate quite how much you sacrifice though. And I think it's not something to go into lightly. And I wouldn't be like, if you have an idea, don't go and quit your job tomorrow, like ease into it, try to go part-time, see if that idea has any traction. Because it's not easy to get it off the ground. And I think that people really underestimate the sacrifice. Like no one tells you that you can't get a mortgage as a founder. Like no one.
It's impossible.
No one told you.
Yeah.
We got like 6 months in and we were like, oh shit, like we can't get a mortgage. And obviously we're both in it together. So that wasn't a great realization. We probably should have done the research there. But no one tells you that kind of stuff.
Tells you.
And no one tells you this, you're on no salary. You're not paying yourself for ages until you can raise funding. But then loads of people go and try and raise the funding because they want to be able to pay themselves. But that's not always the right reason to raise funding. Like there's so much you have to think about. But if somebody told me, if you could like travel in a time machine back to 2019 when we had the idea and they could like do a flash forward of the next 2 and a bit years and I saw everything that was going to happen, I probably wouldn't have done it.
No. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's just so much shit that you have to deal with the whole time.
And just uncertainty and stress and anxiety, and there's just so much that you have to think about. And that would be very overwhelming in the first instance. Like I absolutely don't regret it now. I love what we do. And I think we've got so much potential. But if you knew all of that up front, I don't think very many people would start a business.
But also when you're looking at it, you're looking through the lens of who you are at that point in your life and what your resilience is like.
Way
and
lower.
How much you can really take.
Yeah.
Whereas along the way, you've spoken about these steep learning curves, you would have built so much of that resilience and you'll be able to manage so much more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think resilience is a really important skill for founders. Really.
Is there anything else that you've experienced where you were like, wow, I wish I knew about that beforehand. I wish somebody told me.
Definitely on the fundraising side of things, yes. So I think, and Tom Ferry, I was on his podcast a while ago and he's actually one of our investors. He's been pretty pivotal to us being able to raise money well. And he once said to me, and he posts about it a lot on LinkedIn now, but he sort of became my unofficial mentor with fundraising. And he was like, no one cares about your product or the problem you're solving. You have to paint this enormous like picture of how big it can be and what the market is. And I think I really underestimated that. And if somebody had told me that 2 years ago, I think I definitely would have raised money very differently.